Hi, everyone. My name is Emma Rose McCadden,
And I'm Rainamei Luna.
and we're going to be reading through the materials that we created for our co-chair proposal for the Autism Collaborative. Starting with a short biography. Myself, Emma Rose, I am an autistic PhD student and a lecturer at UVM. I've been attending collaborative meetings since I first started my doctorate 6 years ago. My first degree was in cognitive neuroscience, and I've been studying the way that people's brains work since I learned that I was autistic. I research autistic lived experience, and I identify as an autistic author when I publish my work. I also teach the Autism Assessment and Intervention class as an adjunct professor at UVM. My mentor is Patty Prelock, and I used to be the manager for her autism lab. I also work for the Vermont state government as the policy and program developer for autism services, as well as services for people who have other disabilities or are older Vermonters. Before working here, I worked for the special education department for the government. I work really hard to be heard as an autistic person in this role and to change the way our government thinks about accessibility and inclusion of neurodiverse people in our state. I'm currently the state liaison for the Vermont Communication Task Force. We make sure that people can use any type of communication that they need. I'm also not the only autistic person in my family, so I have a lot of experience with the ways that two autistic people or people with autism can have different needs. Sometimes these needs mean it is hard to find a solution that works for everyone. Figuring out what everyone needs to show up in the Autism Collaborative is very important to me. Rain?
Thanks, Emma. So I'm Rainamei Luna, but you can call me Rain. I'm an educational developer at the Center for Teaching and Learning, CTL, at the University of Vermont. I hold a PhD from Pennsylvania State University, an MA from Columbia University, and a BA from the Eastman School of Music at the University of Rochester. My connection to the autistic community is both personal and professional. I have very close family members and friends who are autistic, and during my time as a K through 6 music teacher, I had the absolute joy of working with many students, including autistic students. These experiences informed my doctoral research, which explored the lived musical experiences of young autistic adults in the arts and higher education. I collaborated often with colleagues in dance, communication sciences, and disorders, and the arts to co-facilitate inclusive programming with students with disabilities. I also worked in a campus-based transition program for autistic young adults and in a separate community-based space welcoming autistic individuals of all ages. At UVM, I co-lead the Neurodiversity in Education series with Dr. Alice Anaker, and I draw on Universal Design for Learning, UDL, in both my teaching and facilitation of workshops. My current research looks at neurodivergent student experiences and institutional practices in higher education with a particular focus on inclusive course design and accessibility. So, what we're going to do now is we're going to transition to our other materials where we're going to look at our proposals and ideas for the UVM Autism Collaborative. I will start first, and that part is what we want to focus on during our time together. And so there are a couple of aspects that we would like to focus on, the first being community and action. In this aspect, we would like to increase understanding and action amongst UVM faculty and staff. And we also want to use my ties and the connections that I've made through the Center for Teaching and Learning, as well as Emma Rose's Vermont State Government connections. We also would like to do some crossover engagement with other autism groups and organizations, which include OAS, CDCI, the Disabled Student Union, to increase efficacy and decrease duplicate efforts. The second aspect we would like to focus on is research and change. Emma Rose will be conducting her dissertation on a topic identified by the collaborative. Emma, you might want to speak more to this, but we also want to do some community generated research questions, as well as looking through a neuro-inclusive lens that celebrates autistic lived experiences. The other thing we would like to focus on is individual and family engagement. And when Emma and I were talking, we really want to be able to compensate participants with lived experiences. That's really important to us. We also would like to propose a caregiver because we know that in the UVM Autism Collaborative, we have family members who are also attending, which includes caregivers, and propose sort of book club or a panel where we can meet and talk about different topics and themes. We also want to build advocacy capacity through a peer mentorship model and involve parents via partnerships including VFN, All Brains Belong, Teen Connection Centers, as well as various educational resources. And I'm going to hand it off to Emma.
Thanks, Rain. So the next section of our proposal is about how we plan to do things as leaders or as co-chairs of the collaborative. So we have a couple of sections here. The first is strategic structure. And this section is about how we plan to be leaders and involve other people in the collaborative. So the first point here is that we really want to focus on centering the community voices with lived experience. So speaking to what Rain had said about being able to compensate participants, we also want to make sure that those voices are at the center of what we do. We want to also be focusing on what the different needs and voices are, even within our collaborative. So figuring out what the competing needs might be of our collaborative and working to make sure we meet everyone's needs. We would like our community guidelines to be co-created so that everybody who is a part of the collaborative is with us while we talk about what those guidelines are going to be. And then really prioritizing the de-normalization, making it not normal to think through the neurotypical standards or lens. Our next point as how we're going to do things as leaders is our organization and the operations of the collaborative. So as co-chairs, Rain and I would like to have there be more roles defined within the collaborative. So not just chair and member, but also other roles that speak to your strengths. We'd like to include committees in this. We want all members of the collaborative to get to identify their strengths and share them with the collaborative. We'd like to think about hosting some hybrid events for accessibility for people and have our meetings be consistent with updates around what's happening with grants and research. Rain and I talked about our leadership philosophy, how we plan to do things and think about things. We would like to follow the lead of people with lived experience, so have them at the forefront. We would be taking a back seat when it comes to people directing where we're going if they have lived experience. We would like to be collaborative, transparent, and flexible with our leadership. We would like to start our co-chair era with conducting a needs assessment that would guide our focus, figuring out what's needed in the collaborative. When it comes to communication and planning for the collaborative, we would like to develop an online network or platform that allows for real-time conversation within the collaborative. Hopefully doing this would also reduce our duplication of effort or having people do the same thing without knowing someone else is doing it. We would like to use visual tools that support the action items and prioritize what we're doing so that everyone can have a common sense of what we're working on. And we'd also like to be transparent about our meeting agendas so that people can prepare before the meeting. This would create more time for people to process what we're talking about and show up to the collaborative with some time to formulate what they want to say and maybe create that beforehand. And then lastly, in our communication, we want to focus on having some one-to-one or small group check-ins for people who are a part of the collaborative so that everyone can talk to us about how they want to be involved best. And then lastly, our infrastructure and sustainability, or the way that we want to structure things within the collaborative and how to make it so it can continue getting better and better. We want to make our website ownership and responsibilities clear, who is going to do what and how we're going to make the website current. And then we also want to look at ways to make money that aren't grants. Maybe we offer some member-led services, like people could hire someone in the collaborative to do inclusive event setup or to be talking about what it would look like to make it more accessible for people with autism. Also partnering with organizations like All Brains Belong to host events with us and build our community. So that is the overview of what Rain and I have talked about how we'd like to structure being co-chairs of the Autism Collaborative. Thank you so much for listening, and we'll see you soon.
Hi, everyone. Thank you.